So what do you say we spend a little time in the garden today? All right, all right, all right. I've got a beautiful cover crop of Kodiak Brown Mustard here behind me, and it's time to incorporate that into the soil as part of our biofumigation plan. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to take a look, see how well this did as a cover crop for us. We're going to chop it, and we're going to till it into the soil. So just as a disclaimer, for all you kind of fist waving no-till advocates out there, all you big no-till flag bearers, this video might not necessarily be for you, but I would encourage you to stick around because you might just learn something. So before we take a closer look here, let's talk real quick about nematodes. Some of you may be familiar with what nematodes are, some of you may not. Nematodes are tiny little microscopic worms that live in our garden soils and all soils basically. They're the most abundant animal on the planet. There are good nematodes and there are bad nematodes. We like the good nematodes. They have lots of great benefits for our soils. The bad nematodes though can really cripple our plants if we have an overabundance of them in our soil. So we try to manage those bad or those parasitic nematode populations as much as we can. They're going to affect certain crops more than others. They really like nightshades. You'll see them with tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, things like that. Thank you, Mr. Loud Truck. And you'll also see them with okra, and that's what we had in this plot here before. We had a whole patch of okra, like 10 rows of okra in here, and you can see them when you pull up those okra plants or you look at the roots, you can see little nodules on them there, and that's an indication that you've got some root knot nematode problems. So we try to manage those parasitic nematode populations as best as we can. Now there are products out there called nematicides, which you can put on your soils, like as a soil drench, that do work as far as just, eliminating those parasitic nematodes. However, those products are not very selective, and they're pretty much just going to wipe out all of your nematode soil life, good and bad. So we definitely don't want to use those, and we like to take a more sustainable approach to controlling those bad nematodes. And this biofumigation process we do is the best way we have found to do that. So without getting too deep into the chemistry here, let's talk a little bit about how this works. So some plants or some families of plants, especially brassicas, contain these certain chemical compounds called glucosinolates. And once incorporated or chopped up into the soil, those convert to these other chemical compounds called thiocyanates and isothiocyanates. And that is what can eliminate those parasitic nematodes. It happens several ways. It can damage the DNA of those parasitic nematodes and eventually kill them. It can also damage those eggs. So a lot of times the nematode eggs will have kind of a covering around them that protects them, allows them to overwinter in your soil. And these chemical compounds that break down from this mustard can make those eggs not viable, and so you're breaking those population cycles there and eventually reducing your harmful nematode populations. Now, I said brassicas have those compounds, and depending on the brassica, one variety may have more of it than the other. We typically use mustard for this biofumigation process, and we've used the traditional Florida broadleaf mustard in the past. That's one you can eat. Really tasty treat to have in the garden this time of year. But the one we have growing here is called Kodiak Brown Mustard, and this is a spicier mustard than the Florida broadleaf mustard. So this is not one you would necessarily want to eat. But because it is spicier, the spiciness comes from those glucosinolates I talked about earlier. So the spicier the mustard, the more the glucosinolates you have there, and the more effective this biofumigation process is going to be. That's not to say it's not effective if you just use Florida broadleaf mustard, but it's going to be more effective with a spicier mustard like this Kodiak Brown Mustard here. The downside is we're not going to really try to harvest or eat any of this stuff because it's not going to be that great to eat. Now when we talk about this biofumigation process, or when we have talked about it in previous videos, we get a lot of people asking, well, how does this not destroy your beneficial nematodes, your beneficial soil biota as well? So I did some research, looked up a few studies on this, and for the most part, it seems to be pretty selective. I saw a study that said that there was no significant damage to the earthworms through this biofumigation process, and that in most cases it actually increased the population of beneficial nematodes, and they attributed that to the organic matter that is being incorporated into the soil. There was one study that said there was a slight decline in what they called entomophagic nematodes, which are insect-eating nematodes. But that was only the one study. All the other studies I saw said that it's not really going to hurt your beneficial soil life, just going to get rid of those bad guys. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, the only way for this biofumigation technique to be effective is you have to incorporate it into the soil. So you can't really do it without soil disturbance. That mustard plant material that's chopped up, whether you mow it or however you chop it up, has to be incorporated into the soil for those glucosinolates to convert to those other chemical compounds that are going to kill the bad nematodes. So you've got to have some soil disturbance there. We're going to do it with a tiller. If you're doing this on a small scale, a raised bed maybe, you could do it with a pitchfork. You know, you could take a weed eater or a machete and cut down the plant material and then kind of incorporate it into the soil with a pitchfork, I presume. So you can do this on a small scale. On our scale, using the tiller makes the most sense. If you're doing it on a real big scale, you could probably do it with a harrow or something like that, and maybe not even have to mow it. If you've got a real big tiller, like one of those king cutters or whatever that go behind a tractor, a real beefy tiller, you probably wouldn't have to cut this. You could probably just go in there, chop it all up into the soil all in one pass. This guy here, this Grillo tiller, is a really good tiller, but it's not going to be able to handle that kind of tall plant debris there, or plant material there, and so I'm going to have to cut it down and then till it into the soil. Now when you're doing this, you got to be a little bit fast with it. So the time between when you cut it down and the time between you till it into the soil needs to be, you know, pretty close to one another. This is not something where you mow it down, you go inside, take a nap, come back, till it in later. You got to be fast with this. You got to get that chopped material into the soil as quick as possible. So you want to make sure your lawnmower is going to crank. You want to make sure your tiller is going to crank, so you can mow it and then till it right afterwards to get the maximal benefit from this process here. Now normally when I'm chopping up or getting ready to terminate cover crops in these little 1,000 square feet plots here, I'll use my little push mower because it's going to mulch everything up and drop it right there. I don't have a mulching deck for my riding mower, but even as thick as this stuff is, we planted it really thick, and as a result we've got some awesome weed suppression. But it's planted really thick, and I don't think my push mower can handle it. So I'm going to get my riding mower and I'm going to try to just go around the outside and kind of keep everything blown towards the middle, kind of equally distribute that plant material so we have it scattered nicely here. I'm just going to set it on the highest deck setting I have there and just chop it down enough so I can get the tiller in there and do the rest of the work. And then with the tiller, I'm probably going to have to make 2 runs here because it is so thick, so much plant mass there, which is a good thing. The more plant material we have, the more glucosinolates we have, the more effective this biofumigation process is. But I'm probably, after I mow it, I'm probably going to till it in this direction, then turn around and till it in the other direction, and that should incorporate everything pretty well. So let me go get on my equipment. We'll get this mowed, incorporated, and then we'll see what it looks like. All right, all right, all right. We got her did. We got all that good stuff chopped up there, incorporated into the soil. The soil is still pretty nice and moist, made it easy to incorporate, and now the stuff is just going to start breaking down pretty quick and converting into those right compounds to get rid of those bad guys. Now, a couple more things about biofumigation, a couple things you can do to make this process work even better for you. One thing is water. So if you put some water on this plot here, or on your plot after you till it in like we did, what that does is that helps some of those chemicals get down even deeper than your tiller could reach. So if you've got nematodes way down deep in the soil profile, you can help eliminate those as well. The other thing you can do is tarp this area here, or tarp your area. And what the tarp does is it kind of just traps everything in there. Now, I don't know if I'm going to tarp this or not, because I may be trying to turn this over in the next few weeks and plant something else here. So tarp may not necessarily, be necessary. But if you've got plenty of time, then the tarp is a great idea, because that makes it work even better. Just know with the tarp, if you're going to tarp it, usually that increases the kind of layover time for when you can plant something else here. So mustard, I know I'm throwing a lot of big words at y'all today, but mustard has some allelopathic effects, and that means it can affect the growth of other plants. That's really good in this situation, because we get nematode suppression, we also get weed suppression here after chopping this up like we did. So we shouldn't really have to worry about any weeds until we go to plant this next. The downside of that is you can't turn over this stuff really quick and come in there a week later and plant something else. You got to give it some time, kind of breathe and do its thing. Some places will say 2 weeks. I would recommend up to a month. So plan ahead when you're doing this. Give yourself about a month between when you till it in and you're actually ready to plant something else there, because all those chemical reactions going on there can affect the subsequent crop of plants if you don't give it enough time. So from my experiences, when you use the tarp, it increases that amount of time you need to give it before you plant something else. The other thing to mention as far as making this process work well is heat. So reports have said that this works better if you're tilling in when you have, warmer temperatures. Now, the caveat to that is we really can't grow mustard in the summer, because it just immediately bolts on us. We can't get that good, size plant leaves like we're looking for. So we just kind of have to deal with what we can here. We grow it in the fall. Thankfully, we're going to get about 2 weeks of relatively warm weather for December, which should be nice and help this stuff do its work even better. So the warmer it is, the more effective it's going to be. Not to say it won't be effective if it's cool, but the warmer it is, the better. And finally, I want to talk about a couple other crops that you can use for biofumigation. So we talked about these spicy brassicas like this Kodiak Brown Mustard that work great for biofumigation. Sorghum Sudan grass is another one that works very well at controlling nematodes. That's a warm season cover crop. We grow a lot of that down here in that time frame between about July to September, when it's so hot we can't grow anything else. We do a lot of sorghum Sudan grass on our plots as a cover crop. So that's a great one to grow for nematode control. Another one is marigold. Marigold, with their roots, they have something there that helps suppress nematodes. And in that case, you don't really have to till it into the soil like you want to do with the sorghum Sudan grass or the mustard here. So if you're on a small scale or you want to do this no-till, marigolds are probably your best bet. So if any of you out there are using mustard as a biofumigate cover crop, let me know in the comments below how it's going for you. Maybe you've already tilled yours in. Maybe you're a little bit ahead of me. If you have any other questions about this process and how it works, definitely let me know. If you grow a lot of okra and tomatoes, nightshades and stuff like that, definitely something to consider adding into your garden rotation. I'll put some links below to our Florida broadleaf mustard and this Kodiak Brown Mustard, so you can give this a try in your garden. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. And if you did enjoy this one, check out these other 2 videos right here. I think you'll really enjoy those as well. We'll see you next time.